There is a quiet moment many women experience, usually when no one is watching. It happens when an important task sits untouched, day after day. Not because she doesn't care, but because something inside her hesitates. She tells herself she will start tomorrow. And tomorrow becomes next week. And next week becomes a gentle ache of disappointment she carries in silence. If this feels familiar, know this: procrastination is not your failure. It is your body asking for a different kind of wisdom. In Japanese philosophy, procrastination is not seen as laziness. It is seen as resistance of the spirit, a sign that the heart and the action are not yet aligned. And for women who have lived long lives, who have carried responsibilities, expectations, and emotional weight for decades, this resistance often comes from exhaustion, not indifference. You were never meant to push yourself the way you were taught. Many women in their 40s, 50s, and 60s believe they procrastinate because they lack discipline. But the Japanese perspective offers something softer and far more powerful. It begins with the simple truth: when an action feels heavy, it is often because it has been disconnected from meaning. In Japan, there is a concept called ikigai, often translated as reason for being. But for women, ikigai is more intimate than that. It is the quiet reason your heart wants to move. When ikigai is missing, action feels forced. When ikigai is present, action feels natural. A woman may delay writing, organizing, starting a project, or making an important decision not because she is incapable, but because she no longer knows why it matters to her. Somewhere along the way, her life became filled with obligations that belonged to others. Her own desires learned to wait, and waiting became a habit. Another Japanese principle gently enters here: kaizen. Kaizen means small, continuous improvement, but it is often misunderstood. Kaizen is not about productivity. It is about respect for the nervous system. It understands that large demands overwhelm the body, especially a body that has spent years caring for others. Kaizen does not ask, "Why haven't you started?" It asks, "What is the smallest movement your heart can tolerate today?" This is where procrastination begins to soften. Imagine a woman named Naomi. She is 56 years old. For years, she has postponed organizing her personal finances. Not because she doesn't know how, but because the thought of facing numbers makes her chest tighten. Each time she thinks about it, she feels shame for not having done it sooner. That shame becomes paralysis. From the Japanese perspective, Naomi does not need pressure. She needs safety. Instead of telling herself, "I must finish this," she begins with kaizen. She places the folder on the table. She does nothing else. The next day she opens it for 2 minutes. She does not analyze. She does not decide. She simply looks. Her body learns that nothing bad happens when she approaches the task. This is how procrastination dissolves, not through force but through trust. Japanese wisdom understands something many cultures ignore. The body remembers. If a task is linked to fear, criticism, or past failure, the body resists before the mind even speaks. Procrastination is often self-protection wearing a misunderstood mask. There is another concept the Japanese live by, often without naming it: ma. Ma is the space between things. The pause. The breath. Western culture fills every space with urgency. Japanese culture honors space as essential. When a woman procrastinates, she often believes she needs more pressure. In truth, she needs more space. Space to reconnect with herself. Space to remember why she cares. Space to approach life without being chased by it. Here is something important to hear: you do not procrastinate because you are weak. You procrastinate because at some point your life stopped listening to you. And this moment right now is an invitation to listen again. If this resonates with you, I invite you to pause for a moment and reflect. What is one important thing you have been postponing, not because you don't want it, but because it feels emotionally heavy? You're welcome to share it in the comments. Your story may help another woman feel less alone. As women mature, their intuition becomes stronger. But many were taught to ignore it in favor of duty. Japanese wisdom gently reverses this. It teaches that action must come from alignment, not obligation. Another subtle principle is Shoshin, beginner's mind. Shoshin invites you to approach tasks without the weight of past expectations. Not as the woman you were, not as the woman you think you should be, but as the woman you are today. When you say, I should have done this years ago, procrastination tightens. When you say, today I begin as I am, procrastination loosens its grip. Beginner's mind allows a woman to forgive herself for time past. And forgiveness creates movement. Many women delay starting because they believe the outcome must be perfect. But perfection is not Japanese. Presence is. In tea ceremonies, every movement is intentional, slow, and imperfect. And that is where the beauty lives. The Japanese method for overcoming procrastination is not about doing more. It is about doing with presence. Presence turns fear into curiosity. Curiosity turns avoidance into approach. Instead of asking, how do I finish this? Ask, how can I meet this gently? One small action, one breath, one moment of honesty with yourself. And slowly something shifts. The task no longer feels like an enemy. It becomes a conversation. Procrastination fades when a woman stops fighting herself and starts walking beside herself. This is not the end of the method. This is the doorway. There is a deeper layer, one that transforms not only what you do but how you see yourself when you do it. And it is there that true consistency is born, without struggle, without guilt, and without pressure. As the Japanese view it, procrastination is rarely about time management. It is about emotional alignment. When a woman delays what matters to her, there is often an invisible conversation happening inside her, one shaped by years of expectations, disappointments, and the quiet habit of putting herself last. Over time, this inner dialogue becomes so familiar that she no longer questions it. She simply accepts the delay as part of who she is. But the Japanese method invites a woman to look deeper, not to judge the delay, but to understand what it is protecting her from. In many cases, procrastination appears when a task threatens a woman's sense of safety. Safety does not always mean physical comfort. Often it means emotional protection. Finishing something important can awaken fear of judgment, fear of failure, or even fear of success, because success sometimes asks a woman to step into a version of herself she has never fully claimed. Japanese wisdom does not ask a woman to push past this fear. It asks her to walk with it. One of the most subtle but powerful principles in Japanese culture is the idea of harmony over control. Life is not meant to be dominated but guided. When a woman tries to control herself through pressure, deadlines, and harsh self-talk, her body resists. When she guides herself through rhythm and respect, her body cooperates. This is where the method deepens. Instead of asking, why can't I just do it? The Japanese approach gently reframes the question to something far more compassionate. What part of me feels unsafe starting? This question alone can dissolve years of self-criticism. Consider a woman named Helen, 60 years old, who has postponed writing a personal project for more than a decade. She tells herself she lacks discipline, but beneath that belief lives an old wound. When she was younger, her ideas were often dismissed, her voice interrupted, her thoughts minimized. Starting the project does not just mean writing. It means remembering. It means vulnerability. Her procrastination has been guarding her heart. When Helen begins to see procrastination as protection rather than failure, something softens inside her. And softness is not weakness. In Japanese philosophy, softness is strength because it allows movement. Another concept quietly supporting this method is the idea of ritual. In Japan, action is often preceded by ritual, not urgency. Ritual tells the body that what is about to happen is safe, intentional, and meaningful. Western culture often skips this step, demanding immediate output. The body responds with resistance. For women who procrastinate, creating a ritual around beginning is often more important than focusing on finishing. A ritual can be as simple as preparing tea before working, opening a window, lighting a candle, or sitting in silence for 1 minute before starting. These acts are not distractions. They are signals to the nervous system that you are not being chased. You are choosing. When a woman chooses instead of forcing, procrastination loosens its grip. Japanese teachings also emphasize the importance of timing, known as the right season. Just as flowers bloom when conditions are right, meaningful action emerges when internal conditions are supportive. Many women judge themselves harshly for not acting sooner, without realizing that they were surviving, not stagnating. The right season often arrives quietly. It arrives when a woman finally feels allowed to care about herself again. It arrives when she stops asking for permission. It arrives when her inner voice becomes kinder. And kindness changes behavior more effectively than criticism ever could. At this point in the journey, it is important to address something many women carry silently: guilt. Guilt for wasted time. Guilt for unfinished dreams. Guilt for knowing what they want but not moving toward it. Japanese wisdom does not deny this guilt, but it does not feed it either. It treats guilt as a signal that compassion is needed. When guilt is met with gentleness, it transforms into clarity. A woman begins to see that procrastination was not stealing her time. It was asking her to slow down enough to listen. And if you feel that this perspective is opening something inside you, this may be a beautiful moment to stay connected. And if you haven't yet, feel welcome to subscribe to the channel and continue exploring this path of feminine wisdom with us. As clarity grows, the method invites the woman to reconnect with ikigai in a more grounded way. Not as a grand purpose but as a daily reason to begin. For mature women, ikigai often shifts from achievement to meaning. It becomes less about proving and more about honoring. A task connected to ikigai feels different in the body. It may still feel challenging, but it no longer feels empty. For example, a woman who has been postponing organizing old photographs may believe she is avoiding effort. In truth, she may be avoiding emotion. Those photographs represent chapters of her life: love she gave, roles she played, versions of herself she outgrew. When she reframes the task as honoring her story instead of completing a chore, her resistance changes shape. Meaning invites movement. Japanese wisdom also teaches that identity shapes action. A woman who sees herself as someone who always delays will unconsciously protect that identity. The method gently invites her to shift the story she tells herself, not through affirmation but through experience. When she begins with small, respectful actions, her identity adjusts naturally. She becomes a woman who starts gently, a woman who trusts her pace, a woman who follows through without violence toward herself. And once identity changes, consistency follows without force. Procrastination fades not because the woman becomes stricter, but because she becomes more aligned with who she truly is at this stage of life. This stage, after all, is not about urgency. It is about integration. There is still one final layer of the Japanese method, one that brings everything together and turns effort into flow. It is the moment when action no longer feels like a battle, but like a natural extension of self-respect. That is where this journey leads next. In the Japanese method, the final shift happens when a woman stops trying to motivate herself and begins to honor herself. This may sound subtle, but it changes everything. Motivation rises and falls, especially for women who have spent decades responding to external needs. Honor, however, is steady. It does not rush. It does not punish. It creates a quiet commitment that does not depend on mood or pressure. When a woman honors herself, procrastination no longer has a place to hide. This stage is not about discipline in the traditional sense. It is about dignity. In Japanese culture, dignity is woven into daily life through mindful action, respectful pacing, and attention to the present moment. A woman does not act because she is forcing herself forward. She acts because her actions reflect who she has decided to be. At this point, action becomes an expression of self-respect. Many women reach this stage only after understanding that procrastination was never their enemy. It was a signal that something inside them needed gentler conditions. Once those conditions are created through meaning, ritual, safety, and identity shift, action begins to flow naturally. There is a Japanese principle that supports this transition beautifully: Consistency over intensity. The culture does not glorify bursts of effort followed by exhaustion. It values steady, almost unnoticeable movement. This is especially important for mature women, whose bodies and minds no longer thrive under constant urgency. A woman who moves consistently does not need to push herself. She trusts herself. Imagine a woman named Grace, 63 years old, who has delayed making an important life decision for years. She has gathered information, reflected deeply, and waited for clarity that never seemed to arrive. Each time she tried to force a decision, her body resisted. Her sleep became restless. Her mind became louder. Procrastination felt like stagnation. When Grace applied the Japanese approach, she stopped asking herself to decide everything at once. Instead, she committed to one small act of respect each day related to the decision. One day, she wrote a single page about what she wanted her life to feel like. Another day, she took a quiet walk and noticed what brought her peace. Over time, clarity emerged not as pressure, but as knowing. She did not rush her decision. She arrived at it. This is the essence of the method. Action becomes inevitable when it grows out of alignment. Another important element at this stage is forgiveness. Japanese wisdom does not dwell on wasted time. It understands that time lived is never wasted. Every delay taught something. Every pause preserved something. When a woman forgives herself for the past, she releases the emotional weight that was slowing her down. Forgiveness restores energy. And with restored energy, important things no longer feel so heavy. As women move through their 40s, 50s, and 60s, their relationship with time changes. Time is no longer something to chase. It becomes something to inhabit. The Japanese method respects this shift. It does not demand urgency. It invites presence. Presence is the antidote to procrastination. When a woman is present with a task, she is no longer projecting fear into the future or regret into the past. She is simply here with one meaningful action in front of her. And presence, practiced gently, becomes momentum. At this point in the journey, many women notice a profound internal change. They stop describing themselves as procrastinators. They stop carrying that label. They begin to see themselves as women who move at a humane pace, women who act when alignment is present, women who trust themselves enough to begin without violence. Identity completes the transformation. The Japanese method does not promise that a woman will never delay again. Life still has seasons. Energy still rises and falls. But it offers something far more valuable. It teaches a woman how to return to herself when she feels stuck, without shame and without force. And that skill lasts a lifetime. As this journey comes to a close, it is important to remember that procrastination was never asking you to become someone else. It was asking you to come home, to slow down, to listen, to act from meaning rather than obligation. When a woman honors her own rhythm, important things no longer feel like burdens. They feel like expressions of who she has become. And if this journey has touched something inside you, if it has helped you see yourself with more compassion and clarity, I invite you to stay with us. If this reflection resonated, subscribe and join this circle of feminine wisdom, where growth is gentle and transformation is allowed to unfold in its own time.